Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you've been well. As is probably apparent through the video thumbnail and title, this video is all about tires. So I'll try and put chapters down below like I usually do so you can skip ahead. This will be a very, very helpful video if you don't know much about tires, or if you do know a little bit or a lot about tires, you maybe will learn something, or maybe it'll just be a good refresher for you. So yeah, kind of tire basics, what some of the numbers mean, some things to look out for. And what I have behind me here is 4 different vehicles running 4 different types of tires. The vehicles are kind of different use cases and different vehicles, like little truck, bigger SUV, smaller compact utility vehicle. So we'll be talking about the tires that I have on my personal vehicles. And then the other interesting thing is Toyo is a partner of mine. So these are all Toyo tires. So you'll get to hear me talk about the differences, but you can apply these to really any tire manufacturer, honestly, because most of the main tire manufacturers are making multiple different tires in the range. So I have it kind of from most aggressive to least aggressive down there. So the full-blown MT to the kind of hybrids. This is the AT3, and this is actually a Celsius tire. So towards the second half of the video, I'll be talking specifically on those tires and kind of what I like about them, and why you might pick one over the other. But for a bit, I'm just gonna, quit swinging this camera around crazy, put it on a tripod, and just talk to you a little bit about some tire basics. So tires. I always say wheels and tires are the best upgrade you can make to any vehicle. And that's not just me, that's almost everyone. If you watch a generic car or truck channel that's comparing like 2 different vehicles on off-road capabilities, and they don't have the exact same tires in the exact same size, you can basically ignore that off-road test because it won't tell you a whole lot, because the tires you're using will make the single biggest difference to your off-road capability, period. Bar none's, hand down. And the reason I say wheels and tires, I'm running 17-inch Relations race wheels on a lot of these vehicles. Love those wheels. Usually when you get a vehicle, especially if you're going to be using it for off-road, from the factory, they're gonna put it on bigger wheels, 18s or 20s a lot of times, and you're gonna want to get those as small as possible. But I'll talk about that in the future. So when I usually say upgrade your wheels and tires, it's for a few reasons that I'll get to in this video. But really, tires are going to make the single biggest difference off-road, more than anything, even more than lockers, more than literally anything, is your tire choice. So tires are hugely important. So again, if you're watching some off-road tests and they're not very specifically talking about tires, or the vehicles have the same tires, to a certain extent, you could ignore that. So whenever possible, you're gonna want to have as small a wheel as you can fit while clearancing for your brake needs, your brake and caliper needs inside of here. So again, a lot of vehicles will ship from the factory with 18 or 20-inch wheels, but you can usually, a lot of times, drop down to a 17-inch wheel or an 18-inch wheel. Now this would be different with like an F550 or something like that have gargantuan brakes, but a lot of times a 17-inch wheel. You can see here in the Tacoma, I actually have upgraded brakes and rotors, upgraded to these power brakes, and the 17-inch wheel still has clearance for this. So you'll be able to find some information out there specific to your vehicle, but even something like the Tundra over here, I also have it on 17-inch wheels. Now maybe you're asking, why 17s versus 18s or 20s? I really like the look of 22s. Now this video, again, is geared at kind of off-roading, overlanding, stuff like that. When you have a smaller wheel or a rim, you're allowed to have more sidewall. You have more room for rubber, more room for meat. And what that means is it'll give you a more compliant ride. It'll be a little bit smoother. But the main difference is it'll allow you to air down more. So when you're off-road, you want to air down your tires, and the more sidewall you have to work with, the more your tire is going to be able to spread out when you're airing down. And airing down off-road is critical for a few reasons. One is it makes your ride way smoother. You have your suspension on your vehicle, but when you air down, you basically have another set of suspension right built into your tire. So that's going to be absorbing bumps. It's going to be absorbing rocks. It's going to allow you to roll over like a smaller rock and not even feel it. It's going to be nicer over washboards. And the second reason is it's going to give you more traction. It's going to increase the contact area of your tire. So if you imagine your tire's at 100 PSI, for instance, when it's touching the ground, it's basically only touching this small little portion. When you're aired down, it means you have less pressure inside of the tire and it's going to flex down. So now you imagine your tire's flexed down to here, it's going to be touching the ground from here all the way over to here. So it's going to have a much larger contact path front to back. It's going to get a little bit wider as well, but mostly it's going to increase your front to back contact and thus your traction. It's going to kind of turn this one little spot, point of contact, into kind of like a tread. That's why devices like the Max Trax traction boards, the reason they give so much traction, they allow you to get out of stuck things, is it's turning your little contact patch into a whole tread. So airing down, hugely important off-road. It'll allow you to kind of wrap over like rocks and stuff if you're rock crawling as well. So airing down, super important. So then choosing a tire size, right? This is a Tacoma on 35s. This is a Tundra on 37s. This is LX 470 on roughly 34s. And the RAV4, I honestly don't know. I'll have to look at that later. But the RAV4 has no lift whatsoever, running basically a factory size tire. This has some trimming and stuff, running a slightly bigger than factory tire. This has a lift and some trimming. This has a lift and some trimming, running bigger tires and different offsets on the wheels. Now, this isn't a discussion on wheels, this video specifically, but you will want to get a wheel in a width and obviously a diameter that matches the size of tire. The offset or the backspace of a wheel will dictate how far out your tire sticks from the fender flares. So the offset of the wheel actually matters more than the width of the tire. But width of the tire is another thing to kind of factor in. So the width of a tire, when you see something like a 35 by 1250 R17, the 35 is imperial, it's inches, 35 inches tall. The 1250 is 12.5 inches wide. That's different than the metric scale. Where is it on a tire so I can just show you what that looks like. So this is LT 285 75 R17. Now it's different, gets a little confusing. The 285 now is actually the width of the tire in millimeters. 75 R17. 75 is really a ratio, and that's talking about sidewall. So this formula, 285, 75 R17, you need all of those numbers to really calculate the actual diameter of the tires. And there are a million converters online to convert what that metric size is into imperial. But no matter what, how big of a tire and how wide of a tire is going to affect everything for you. How can you fit it? So by default, you know, a Tacoma, third gen Tacoma comes with like, I don't know, 31 or 32 inch tires probably. So when you make a bigger tire fit, in the rear, your tire is really only going up and down. So usually you don't have a whole lot of clearance issues in the rear unless you go really big, and then you'll need to chop. The issue comes in the front here, where your tire and wheel turn. So they don't just turn like this, they really kind of arch just because they're out with the axle. Again, I'm trying not to get too into the weeds in this video, but your tire is going to actually move back, and this is going to be your main area that you're going to feel your tires rubbing. So I've done like a body mount relocate, bunch of fender chop. You got to do a bunch of stuff to fit 35-inch tires. I'll talk later in the video for like the sweet spot for tires. 35 is not it on a Tacoma. 33 really is the sweet spot here. So you need to decide what tire size you want. And again, a lift and clearancing is going to dictate that, your offset, and then your width. A taller tire, a bigger tire, a 35-inch or a 37-inch tire is typically going to be better off-road for a variety of reasons. It makes bigger obstacles become smaller and more traversable. It smooths out the ride again, and it gives you more traction. So a bigger tire is going to be better for off-road up to a certain point. So yeah, there's going to be a bunch of clearance issues with bigger tires, and also there's going to be power issues. The tire is going to be heavier. It's going to be obviously bigger, so it's going to be harder for your motor and drivetrain to move. It's going to put more wear and tear on all of your drivetrain as well. So a lot of times, like I'm on 529 gears here, you're going to need to re-gear your vehicle, your speedometer is going to be off, and you're going to lose power, and you're going to lose fuel efficiency. That almost always happens as you go to a bigger tire. So pros and cons to think about there. And then tire width is open to debate. There's some people that love Skinnies. There's some people that love Fatties. Talking about tires here. And they each kind of have their place. The wider a tire is, the more kind of flotation it's going to have. In sand, in deep snow, in deep mud, a lot of times rocks, certain rock scenarios, a wider tire is going to be better, because it's going to allow you to kind of stay on top. It's going to be able to bite into more of a surface area, and it's going to, in general, be better. It's going to be worse in some ways, too. There is a whole group of people that love Skinnies. I kind of like Skinnies as well. These aren't really skinny or fat. They're 1250. It's a pretty standard size, standard width size for an off-road tire. But the skinnier you get, that's actually going to be better for on-road, like snow performance. You're going to have more contact pressure, so you're actually going to push down a little harder because your weight isn't spread out over as much surface area. So on-road in the winter in kind of lighter snow, that's actually going to be better for traction for you. Certain mud scenarios where there's only a certain amount of mud and then there's hard pack below it, the Skinnies are going to be able to dig through that mud and actually find traction. Now, not all mud scenarios are like that, but certain mud scenarios, Skinnies are actually better than Fatties here. And they're going to have less rolling resistance. They're typically going to be a lighter tire. So for the same size diameter, a skinnier tire will often feel a little quicker because there's less mass and there's less rolling resistance. So some pros and cons to both Skinnies and Fats to consider. So yeah, going up in tire size will almost always negatively impact your on-road performance. In addition to that, it will make you more prone to breaking things. All of your components are working harder. Your brakes are working harder to stop all of that rolling resistance. Your axles are working harder. Your suspension is working harder to keep the extra weight of those wheels and tires in check. So you're opening up your vehicle to all kinds of more stress. So if you're not going to off-road your vehicle, it really makes no sense to put on bigger tires and a lift also negatively impacts all of your on-road characteristics. So if you're really not going to off-road your vehicle, or if you're not going to off-road it much, keeping your vehicle stock height and running a stock size tire, just a more aggressive stock size tire, is gonna be your best bet. Once you get into kind of this size of stuff, you're making all of your performance and handling characteristics worse at the very specific benefit of increasing your off-road performance. So just something to consider when you're thinking about wheels and tires. So like I said earlier, there's kind of sweet spots, and this is kind of my personal opinion on things, but vehicles are going to come from the factory again with a specific clearance. They're going to be able to, without modification, run a certain size of tire. And there's kind of a range. So like a second gen or third gen Tacoma, 33 inches is really the sweet spot. Once you get to 35 inches, you're going to rub no matter what. I don't care what anyone tells you, without extensive modifications of trimming, body, tubbing, different types of like upper and lower control arms that are pushing your tire forward or in some direction, you're gonna get rubbing with a 35-inch or greater tire. Also, these little engines, they're robbed of performance. So again, I've updated my suspension, I've upgraded my braking, I've upgraded my differentials to handle these things, but still it's not great. Still, if I'm turned and flexed, I will rub. So sweet spot, I think, for Tacomas is probably a 33-inch tire. Tundra, probably a 35-inch tire, honestly. So I'm up a size from the sweet spot in the Tacoma and the Tundra. I think the LX 570, for what it's worth, is 34-inch is the sweet spot. A 4Runner is very similar to a Tacoma. 33-inch tires, the sweet spot there. But manufacturers have been changing. You can now get, a factory like F-150 Raptor on 37-inch tires, and that is a great tire size for it. So you could probably go up to a 38 or a 39 on a Raptor R or whatever they are. The Bronco Raptors, I think, are 37-inch tires. So 37, maybe 38-inch tires is a sweet spot there. Wranglers now you can get in 37-inch tires. So really in the last like 2 years, factory OEM tires have shot up in size for specific models. So historically, I would say smaller is kind of the sweet spot, but it's getting a little bigger and a little bigger now. I know even the new, they're just out, the 4th gen Tacomas have a little more clearance. So I think you can run a 33-inch tire basically from factory with no rubbing. So running a 35-inch tire on the 4th gen Tacoma is maybe gonna be the sweet spot for the 4th gen Tacoma. So finding the sweet spot, that's kind of an opinion, but if you spend some time in the forums or whatever, you'll probably find that sweet spot, but gonna be different for every vehicle. All right, if you've spent any amount of time in the forums or the comment sections, I got into off-roading 20 or so years ago, back when there was a big debate of like bias ply versus radial. That's not really a thing anymore. Bias ply tires aren't really around as much for road vehicles. They're still kind of for heavy duty trucks or tractors, but bias plies kind of went away and they're all kind of radials now. Then you'll hear this other thing called ply, like I want a 10 ply tire. That's actually not around anymore either. Back in the day, you needed plies, like individual layers to beef up and strengthen your sidewalls. Now with technology, there's no 10 ply tires out there anymore. So anytime someone's referring to a 10 ply tire, either A, they don't know what they're talking about, or B, they're just using it to reference a heavier duty sidewall tire. So a 10 ply tire, historically, that's equivalent to what we call a load range E tire now. So load ranges, A, B, C, D, E, F, I don't actually know if they're every letter or not. Typically the tires you're gonna find are C, D, and E, probably primarily D and E once you get to kind of the 35-inch size range. The lower the letter, the kind of more compliant they are. There's pros and cons to both. Typically, like an E-rated or what would formerly be a 10-ply tire is gonna be able to handle more sidewall abuse. So if you're really going through some gnarly rocks and stuff all the time, you probably will want a heavier duty ply tire, which would be like a load E tire versus a D or a C tire. They're gonna be heavier and they're gonna be rougher riding tire because again, it's a heavier duty tire. So I wouldn't say you always go for a load range E tire, especially if primarily you're driving on the pavement and sometimes off-road. They're gonna be a tougher tire, but they're gonna be worse on the road in every way versus a D or a C load range tire. So again, be realistic. Those load ratings and those load index, the kind of heavier duty the tire is, they do come into play with if you're towing a lot or if you have a lot of payload in your vehicle. So if you're towing or if it's a heavier duty vehicle or you're hauling a lot of stuff, you will also want to focus on a higher rating tire. But if you're just driving like a Tacoma or a 4Runner and you're not really towing and you're not having a ton of weight, then probably like a C or D load range tire will be better for you overall. All of that to say, are you gonna notice a huge difference from a load E to a load D tire? Probably not. That's not a huge noticeable difference, but take it into consideration. All right, now while I feel like everything I talked about is the more important stuff, which is why I put it at the front of the video, people mostly ask me about the mud terrains versus the all-terrains. Do you like the MTs versus the RTs, or the RT trails or the AT3s? So every manufacturer, oh, not every manufacturer, but most of the main manufacturers are gonna have a lineup of tires from kind of most extreme off-road to kind of more on-road friendly. So that's with Toyo, that's with Neta, that's with BFG, that's with Firestone, that's with Falcon. All of these brands will have multiple tires kind of to appeal to the different users, the different end users. So I'm gonna go now from most aggressive to least aggressive. So again, you can find this is the Toyo's line of tires. Not every one. They actually have a few tires in this range that I don't even have. They have kind of like a couple that are in between what I have. But these are the main tires. So again, I'm a fan of Toyo. I am partnered with Toyo. Don't tune out though, if you're like, you love your BFGs. This knowledge applies to every manufacturer really. So a lot of times someone will get into it and they'll see this. This is the sweetest looking mud terrain tire. This is the Toyo Open Country MT. Gnarly, aggressive, insane, beautiful. You look at this and you're like, oh. Yes. And so for a purely off-road tire, this is your best bet. If you're building a rock crawler or something like that, this is definitely the go-to tire. Now this is on my Tacoma. It's primarily my trail rig. It is actually kind of built for this. Granted, I'm not really a wheeler or a pure off-roader anymore. I just take whatever trail I need to take to get to wherever I'm trying to go. And a lot of times that's off-road, sometimes light, sometimes heavier. But this is a pretty good tire for me. Could I do pretty much everything I do on one of these less extreme tires? I absolutely could, actually, but this is the best of the best for off-road. Unfortunately, what that means is there are some trade-offs. It's not the best on-road in the snow. It's not the quietest. They're the heaviest. It gets the worst gas mileage, probably wears down the fastest because the rubber compound of mud terrain tires is usually a little bit softer, which means it wears out a little faster. The lugs are more open. If you didn't know, all modern tires for the last, I don't know, long time now really, these aren't the same size. It kind of goes like smaller to bigger to smaller to bigger. So if you're ever looking at your tires and you think you have a defect or something, you don't. That's for, I don't know enough about sound or frequencies, but that's, if it was all the same size, it would all be hitting the ground at the same time, and you'd get a really, really noisy tire. So there's a lot of technology that goes into tire, both rubber compound design of it and also spacing and sizing, that makes a tire quieter. So this is a modern mud terrain tire. It's not that loud. It doesn't sound like a tractor or a helicopter or something going down the road. It's a little bit louder than these other options, but you'll see, and you'll see as we get further along in the tires, this has essentially a biting surface here, and a little sipe here. The fewer the sipes, typically, the more off-road a tire is going to be. Now, we're not talking about track tires and stuff like that. This is really off-road centric. Some of these things won't apply to, you know, a tire you put on your GTR or something like that. But you have more lugs, and there's a lot of technology in here also for how it dissipates mud, flings mud out. So a mud terrain tire is meant to handle muds, really, but they're also meant to handle rocks and just all kinds of off-road terrains. It's a good tire, great tire for off-road, not a great on-road tire, but it can do on-road. There's plenty of people that have this tire, never touch mud or dirt ever, and you know, these tires will treat them just fine. The only gotcha there, obviously fuel economy and all that stuff is going to be hurt with this tire, but on-road snow performance is not going to be very good with this tire. So if you're just trying to look cool, but you live in the mountains of Colorado and you never go off-road and you always drive on-road, I would skip any mud terrain tire. Not just this one, I would skip any mud terrain tire and go for a tire we'll talk about later. that has, you know, a triple peak snowflake rating, which means it has actually gone through some testing and certification to say, hey, this tire is good on the road. No mud, or good on the road in the winter. No mud terrain tire has that certification, but a great tire for mud and dirt and off-roading. So here we have the mud terrain next to one or two steps down in Toyo's line. Again, Toyo has a pretty big line. I think they have this, then it's the RT right in between it, and then this is the RT Trail. So it's a slightly toned down RT. This is a pretty new tire. It came out, I think, a year and a half ago or something like that. So you'll notice that it is slightly less aggressive, right? There's actually more rubber that's going to be in contact with the road at any given time. That'll be one of the main giveaways of a pure mud terrain versus you're getting into the all-terrain territory. There's more rubber on the road. That makes for a better performing road tire. You'll also notice there's more, each of the lugs isn't as big, which means there's more biting edges. So that'll mean it's got better, you know, little bit better water performance, a little bit better snow performance, a little bit better everything performance. The other difference when you go from a mud terrain tire to an all-terrain tire, now this is a slightly aggressive all-terrain tire, is the sidewall protection. So again, we talked earlier about load ranges and sidewall thickness and everything, but a lot of times you'll have these lugs that are extending down into the sidewalls. That's to help protect the tire more when you're off-road on rocks and sticks and stuff like that. So a mud terrain will typically also be paired with a more aggressive sidewall. Now the RT Trails, they have a less aggressive sidewall, but still pretty aggressive. You'll see this sidewall is more aggressive than the AT3s, which we'll get to next. Now this is a tire that's aggressive enough to also not have the triple snowflake rating. So this tire, a little bit better on road in every way versus the pure mud terrain, but still kind of an off-road centric tire. So this would be probably most of your overlanders and stuff would really do better on this tire. Doesn't look as cool, and for extreme rock crawling and mud, not as good, but pretty good. So a pretty good trade-off. Then we have the next step down in Toyo's lineup, which is the AT3. So you'll see the lug pattern is actually more similar. They're even a little bit smaller now on the AT3 versus the RT Trail. So a little bit closer together, a little bit more rubber in contact with the road. The sidewall, you see, this is the RT Trail, still pretty chunky and aggressive. The AT3's got some of that, but definitely less slow. So as you're getting down further in the lineup, your tire is going to get even lighter. It's going to get a little more compliant on the road, typically, again, depending on your load range. And now you see we're getting into multiple little sipes per lug as well. So these lugs are not only smaller, but they have more siping in them. That helps a lot with rain and snow performance. Now, I didn't even talk in this video about rubber compound. A dedicated winter tire will have a different rubber compound that remains soft even in the snow. So a dedicated winter tire will do better than this tire in the snow. But now we're road manners enough in the lineup for the AT3 to have the triple peak snowflake rating. That's this here. You'll see some tires talking about M+S. That's mud plus snow. That's more of a marketing thing than a true performance thing. I think there's some ratio of open air versus lug that it has to meet to get the M+S. But this, if you live in a snowy climate, you probably want to get tires for this. You might want to research chain traction laws in your state. But a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, every once in a while on a road, a traction law will go into effect that you need either this, sometimes this and all-wheel drive, or maybe just straight up chains. But this, according to the highway, basically says this is a tire that we have determined is good enough in the snow to say we're gonna approve this tire for those law scenarios. So AT3 is really the tire that I pretty much recommend to everyone, especially if the vehicle is a daily driver and it's gonna see primarily road usage, especially if you live in a climate that's gonna see some snow. So the AT3 is a great all-around tire. As you can tell, like still a pretty aggressive tread. It's gonna be able to handle your trails pretty well, but really good road manners. So this is kind of the tire, even if you're not going bigger in tire size, even if you're not doing a lift, even if you're not even switching out your wheels, I would say this would be your first mod. If you're only gonna do one mod, is go to this tire. This will have a huge off-road capability boost versus the tire you get stock from the factory. So this is probably the tire I would recommend for almost everyone, honestly. And then we get even more road mannered down the line here. So this, if you can tell, I don't know, looks more just like a regular tire. Though even this tire is still a little bit, tiny bit more aggressive than most tires you're gonna find even on like a Tacoma or something from the factory. This one is called the Toyo Celsius. I believe this model is specific. They kind of advertise it anyway for the CUV, which is the compact utility vehicle. But you'll see it's not as aggressive, a lot of siping, a lot of vertical runs of traction. That's to kind of help maintain stability and everything on the road. So this is a much more road-oriented tire. You see that the sidewalls are pretty much smooth. They're not chunked out even as much as the AT3s are. So this is a tire. This is gonna be your best tire. It's gonna be your best of all of these tires on the road. This one is also snowflake rated. And this one is also even, still has that M+S designation in this tire. So for my scenarios, again, Tacoma, my main off-road vehicle. Tundra, see some off-road, but kind of general truck use. Again, I live in the mountains of Colorado, so I'm off-road quite a bit. So the RT Trail is pretty good on that, though probably honestly, the reason I went to RT Trails, at least initially, well, the AT3s weren't available in 37s at the time. The AT3s are now available in this size. So probably once these are worn down, I think I'll switch the Tundra even to the AT3s because it sees a lot of road use. And again, I'm sometimes driving this out on the roads in the snow and whatnot. So probably this will get switched to the AT3. And then this is kind of my family tank. I'll take this everywhere, but I'm in the mud a lot, but I'm on the road a lot. I'm driving through the snow. This is that vehicle for me. This is Ashley's vehicle, and pretty much she never goes off-road. Granted, our driveway is a dirt kind of driveway. A lot of road, she'll go to hiking trails or whatever. So she'll frequent forest roads still every here and there, but for the most part, when we're going off-road, we're usually together, and I'm taking one of these vehicles. So this is the tire that makes most sense to her. It's actually probably the best of all of these tires in on-road snow conditions and rain conditions as well. So a very road-oriented tire that is slightly more aggressive than a tire that's going to come on your cars from the factory. So again, probably for most of the people that are watching my channel, I would say the AT3 is the sweet spot in Toyo's lineup. And then that maybe aren't driving off-road as much, or somebody that's just commuting a lot or just is really only going off-road once or twice a year, something like the Celsius is a pretty good option. Whew. Yeah, hope that helps. Anyway, as a relatively quick, I could talk for longer. I could talk for longer. Relatively quick brain dump on tire comparisons, what some of those numbers kind of mean, what you should kind of look for in a tire. But again, even that Celsius is going to be an off-road upgrade from the tire that comes from the factory. and have very near as good on-road handling and performance and wear characteristics to whatever tire that shipped from the manufacturer there. Because you got to remember, when these automotive companies are selling these mass market vehicles, they have to meet a bunch of regulations for the EPA. So trying to get those fuel economy numbers up. A lot of times these vehicles are going to be serviced at Toyota or wherever for the first handful of years. So they want the tires to wear really well and just not really have issues for their main target customer, which is people that are never going to go off-road. So don't think just because you got the TRD off-road version that those tires are the off-road capable tires. Almost always they're not. Again, there's kind of niche vehicles, like if you get an AEV platform, or if you get, you know, like a Raptor or a Bronco Raptor or something like that, they're going to just say this is not a mass market vehicle. We can just kind of put a more aggressive tire on because that's probably what the customer is going to get. But even, I mean, I think even like TRD Pros, you're going to get a very just road-oriented tire. Tire definitely is going to be your biggest upgrade, but not necessarily a much bigger tire. You could stay relatively close to the factory size tire range and gain huge off-road performance with that. So hopefully that video helped. If there's any questions you have down below, let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. I'll put some links down below for some places that I like. You can get wheels and tires. There's a company, Trail Built Off-Road. They actually hooked the Lexus up with that setup, and you can enter your vehicle, whether you have a lift or a leveling kit, whether you're okay with trimming some fenders and whatnot. And a site like that will kind of help you dial in the proper offset. We didn't get into wheels or rims in this video, but their lug patterns and offsets and everything, they're going to be different based on your vehicle. So if you know absolutely nothing, either A, go to like an off-road shop here in the Denver area running for tacos. They're friends of mine. They do very good work. They specialize in Toyotas. And if you just want to go to a dealership and have them do everything, they can order wheels. They can mount them on they can order wheels and tires, mount them, balance them, align your vehicle all at their shop. So if you want to do that, but if you want to just purely order online, I'd recommend a place like Trail Built Off-Road. Again, because they have the configurators, they know, they've plugged in, they've mapped, they've done surveys about tire sizes and kind of like the variances of fitment. A lot of times if you go to just like a Big O Tires or something like that, then sometimes they won't even install a tire that is different than your factory tire, even if that tire will technically fit. So some things just to note: if you're going outside of your factory tire size, you may run into some issue at some tire shops. Some of them at least have a little bit of leniency in, but again, they have all kinds of liability issues and everything. They sell you a tire and then it rubs on your fender and causes some damage. You might sue them. So some things to note: not all of those places are created equal. So again, local shop, somewhere like Running for Tacos here in Denver, online, Trail Built Off-Road. I don't even have an affiliate account with them or anything, but I really like their configurator tool for that kind of stuff. Cool. All right. Well, if you remember, hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below, even if it's just saying, hey, get subscribed to the channel. And until next time, guys, take care.